Hello, my name's Jim Dyer from Fire Barbecue. Today we are going to make some side ribs and we're going to highlight Blues Hog Original and Blues Hog Sweet and Savory Rub. We'll go through all the tips and tricks that you need to know to make competition style, wonderful, delicious side ribs. Let's get going. Alright, so what we have here is a rack of St. Louis cut side ribs. These are just little guys, so they should cook nice and fast today. But, so long story short, this end here, you'll see it kind of looks like floppy and awful. We're going to get rid of that. All that's there is cartilage. So, I mean, you can cook it. It's not that big of a deal. But that traditional bone off the rib that everybody's expecting, you don't get on this little piece of meat. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut that right off. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to flip this guy over. And we're going to grab a paper towel. Now, you can see a membrane back here, right? So we got to get that off. Otherwise, you kind of get this little plasticky layer that you can't even bite through, and it just stays behind, and it's just kind of gross. And also, when you take this off, it allows the flavor to penetrate better. It's just better all around. So how we're going to do this, you'll see I'm working my way under that. Some people will take a knife, and some people will take, you know, a spoon and work it free, but you can get your finger under there. You can see I'm just pulling a little edge, and if you can get all the way under there and get a nice edge, you can just pull it right clean in one swipe. Super easy to do. It does take a little bit of practice to get there, but try to figure it out because it's actually a really easy process to do. And if you leave a little behind, just go back and catch it. You'll see this little raised bit here. Doesn't hurt to trim a little bit of that off as much as you can. It's not a huge deal, but the problem is when you have a piece of meat and one end's thicker than the other, it cooks differently. So you're gonna have a perfectly cooked rack of ribs over here, and these ones will just be a little tough because they didn't get the temp, or this one's gonna be perfect and these are gonna be soggy. So there's really no way to win on that one. So just get rid of it and call it a day. Okay, so now we're gonna season these guys, and we're gonna hit them with sweet and savory. So don't be shy. Give it to them. This is barbecue. This is what barbecue is. It's a world of flavor. You gotta know the rub you're using. Some are a little crazy salty, and you gotta be careful how much you put on. With this one here, you can really slam it to it. So, what I'm gonna recommend is you give this 10-15 minutes to kind of just set and do its thing before you put it on the grill. Some people out there are watching going, well, you didn't use a binder. You don't really need to use a binder. In fact, I'm kind of against binders unless you're trying to do it for flavor. So a good example for that is, say you want these ribs to be nice and spicy, so you're looking for a sweet and spicy kind of combo. At that point, take a hot sauce, cover the whole thing in hot sauce, then hit it with your rub. But when you let this sit, the moisture from the meat's gonna stick that rub all over it, and I've never had an issue. I've never used a binder. It just seems like one extra step that's unnecessary to me. So we're gonna let this guy sit for about 10 minutes. The grill's heating up as we speak. The next step, we'll go to the grill and get them going. All right, so here we are. I have the gateway drum all set up. Fire's lit. I have 2 pieces of hickory chunk in there. You'll see it's about 2 baseball-sized pieces, what you're trying to pick out. I just kind of put on either side of where the charcoal is lit in the middle, and the concept behind that is just going to slowly light as it gets going, and it's ready to go. So I'm just going to stick those ribs on there right now. Now you see these guys what I was talking about there, they kind of got nice and wet and juicy from the salts, pulled out all that moisture from the meat. So now that's why I'm saying about that binder, you know, if you give it a little time to rest, it sticks quite well on its own. So I'm going to put these guys straight down, and I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of push them together as well, and it plumps those ribs up. So when you plump those ribs up, you know, you get weight, you know, it thickens them up. So it makes a cheap cut of ribs seem like they're much more expensive than they are. So instead of busting the bank, you can just squish them together and you get way bigger ribs. So now I've got those guys on there. Something else we're going to do, because we're using a drum, I have a diffuser plate on the bottom that you can't see, what that diffuser plate does is just kind of takes that raw radiant heat and deflects it and spreads it out. But what else we're going to do with this guy is every time I open this lid to check on him, I'm just going to give it a quarter turn. You know, by that time it's going to be hot enough where I'm going to use gloves to do it. But we're just going to give it a quarter turn every time. And what I'm doing is making sure those ribs stay consistent over top of the heat source so they cook evenly and turn out the same at the end. And also it's going to prevent any kind of burning or anything like that. Another thing you can do is halfway before wrap is flip them. And that just is going to prevent the bottom from getting a little too charry. Now, we're going to wrap these ribs next. So when do we know when to pull these ribs to wrap them? There's two ways to go about it. One, never past 160. The meat starts to let go a lot of moisture, around that 160 mark, and you want to save all that juiciness, and you want that meat to cook in its own juices. So I say pull them before 160. I pull them when they look like they're ready to go, when you have a little bit of nice bark build up. I say anywhere between 145 and 160 whenever they look nice. Every cook depends a little bit. So when they look nice, wrap them. Don't go past 160 though, or you're going to find you're going to be drying out a little bit. So now in between this and right now and actually wrapping these ribs, what we're going to do is I'm going to fill an apple juice or a spray container full of apple juice, and I'm just going to spritz them whenever they look dry. Now, do you have to do that? Absolutely not. And if they look really wet, don't spray them. I'm strictly doing it to keep them wet. If you don't have apple juice in a pinch, you can actually just use water. It's not that big of a deal. All we're doing is putting moisture on top of this guy, keeping it moist so it's a nice, juicy, tender rib. The only reason why I'm using apple juice, it's part of my flavor profile, is to build little layers of sweetness on there, and that's what that apple juice helps me do. So we're going to let this guy sit. We're going to check into it every probably half an hour-ish, and once we start looking good or hit 160, we're going to wrap it, and that's when I'm going to bring you back and we'll go from there. Okay, so while those ribs are cooking, I thought it'd be a good time to talk about just in general our processes and why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, so we're starting the ribs out bare so that they can develop, a little bit of a bark and a little bit of kind of a beautiful finish on them, and to pick up some of that delicious smoke flavor. Now, once they've gotten there, the reason why we wrap them is at this point we want to protect that meat. Okay, so when we wrap them, we're also going to put, some butter on there. The oils are going to get introduced, so it's going to kind of almost braise in its own oil and its own grease and keep that moisture in there. But it also protects the meat as well from a little that extra heat near the end. Just keeps them from drying out. And then we're also going to build some new layers in there too. We're gonna put some brown sugar on there. We're gonna put a little honey on there. We're just gonna amp it up a little bit, and we're gonna give it a fresh hit of rub as well. So the reason why we're gonna give it a fresh hit of rub is that as you cook with the rub, it kind of loses some of its pucker, its zest. It just kind of cooks out. Wonderful flavors, but we still want to have a little bit of that brightness. So we're gonna actually put a little bit of that on when we wrap as well, just to keep those flavors front and center. So then at that point, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap them back up, stick them back on the grill. We're also going to put a little bit of apple juice in there with it as well. Not a lot of apple juice. We're not trying to boil the meat, right? What we're trying to do is just add some moisture in there to steam a little bit and just keep that a humid environment for that meat to cook in. If you boil the ribs, what happens is it just kind of is a mushy, non-textured, boiled piece of meat. Whereas if you just go really light, that's not the case. So it makes for a way more wonderful product. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, just because it gets rushed at the end and it's hard to tell the whole tale when we're actually probing it. How do you know these ribs are done? So when you're wrapping them, they're not over 160 yet and they're looking finished. That's easy. You just stick your probe in there, you're good to go. But when you get to the end, they're going to be approximately 204 degrees, but I don't like to recommend people go by temperature. You go by feel. So around 201, 202 degrees, you got to start watching. But how it works is that when you take that probe and it glides in just like butter, that's when you know it's done. If there's resistance, those ribs aren't done yet. And it's important to catch that sweet spot because you can't let it go way too far and where they just start falling apart and are super mushy. So that's it. That is a really good tip, is when you're checking those ribs at the end to see if they're done, that probe goes in. Imagine you're sticking that probe into a warm stick of butter. It's going to have the same amount of resistance. So you're really going to get a little bit of surface tension from the skin. And then once you go through that, from that bark that's developed, there's no resistance whatsoever. And that's how you know the ribs are done. And then when we get to that point, and you'll see this coming up, but when we get to that point, we're going to pull them. We're going to take them out. At that point, we don't want them to get any hotter. So what I like to do is pull them out, unwrap them. If I have to hold them for a little bit, I'll leave them wrapped. But if I don't have to hold them, I'll just open them up and let them cool down right away. And I'll put actually cold sauce on them. And what I'll do, I'll put cold sauce on them, put them back on the grill for another 10-15 minutes, just to let that sauce really set. I don't like to go much longer than that because you lose the glossiness and you lose that kind of shiny, sexy appeal that you can get by not oversetting that sauce, because eventually that sauce will kind of absorb in and they just don't look as pretty. So yeah, that's kind of the tutorial on what we're doing. And now let's get to finishing these ribs. And you see these ribs are done. Well, not done, but they're ready to wrap. So, and you can see it, I mean, they stay juicy. We kept them nice and moist. So I'm going to take these guys off. I'm going to make sure that lid goes right back on so it doesn't wrap up this right away. And we're going to head in and show you how to wrap these puppies up. Alright, so here we are. Ribs are in, foil's out. We're going to start by putting the bones pointing up. The reason for that is we don't want those bones to poke through the foil. So that's the easiest way, just to ensure that you don't lose all this moisture putting in. We're going to give just another tiny shake of that sweet and savory Blues Hog rub. Alright, then we're going to give just a little drizzle of honey. Not too much, just a little bit. We're going to hit with some brown sugar. Now, if this is the point, if you like heat, you also can put a little sprinkle of cayenne or a little splash of hot sauce on there, whatever you want to do. I make them for the family today, so I'm not too concerned about the heat. Going on a step farther, we're just going to take a little bit of that juice and just a little tiny drizzle on there. If you have a sprayer, just a little spritz. And then literally, that's it. So we're just going to wrap this up nice and tight. Now, tight is your friend. Just kind of treat it like a package, if you will. Nice and tight is your friend. You can also get in there a little easier when it's wrapped nicely. The reason for that is you want to keep that heat and moisture right close to the meat so that it picks up and cooks fast. So yeah, that's it for the wrap stage. We've already explained why we're doing the wrap. So we're going to put these guys back on the grill, and then we're going to wait till they get around 200 degrees. Then we're going to start probing them and making sure they're probe tender. And then we hit around that 204 stage, and like I said, that probe glides in just like it's butter. Then we will sauce them and put them back on, and have some ribs for supper. Alright, so this lid can come off. We're gonna check these bad boys. Yeah, and we're going in just like butter. So that probe, like I said, no resistance, it just pops right in. And we are there on that one. We're going to do the same for the second rack. It should be pretty close. I'm going to give that one another 10 minutes. We'll give that another 10 minutes, I'll pull them off, and I'll show you what we're going to do when we take them out. Alright, so here we are. We're just going to pour that sauce right over. Brush it nice on the edges. Flip and repeat. Okay. And now we're gonna do the other rack of ribs as well. We're gonna put them back on that grill for, I'm only gonna put them on for about 5 minutes. These are done, ready to go. And we'll show you what the finished product's gonna look like. All right, here they are. We're gonna just cut into these. Those little bad guys. Now they're just little guys, but man, do those look wonderful. All right. Nice and juicy. Comes right off the bone. The flavor of that sauce and that rub is amazing. Oh, this is a good rib. Yeah. There you have it. Blues Hog Original. Blues Hog sweet and savory. That's so good. Thank you for watching again. I'm Jim Dyer at Fire Barbecue. Till next time.